What's going on, everybody? Welcome to this edition of the official Gin Pros podcast, along with the live stream that is posted for everybody to see on Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook. Thank you guys for joining us today on a Wednesday, August 25th, 2021. Big day in sports, big day for a lot of stuff going on. Really important stuff to talk about today. Got a big show. But yeah, I just want to thank everybody for joining us and giving us support through these times. Good times, really hot out here in Flushing, Michigan. And you know, it's been hot. So I hope you guys have been staying cool, and keeping your head cool, because that's very important. You know, when the temperature rises, sometimes people can get a little hot-headed, and, you know, tempers can flare and things like that. So we kind of want to avoid that at all costs if we can. But yeah, big show tonight. Thank you guys for tuning in. If you don't listen to it now, you'll hear it later on, either on our YouTube channel, Facebook, or on Twitch. And you can hear the audio on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify. So thank you guys. I'll put our links throughout the stream for those watching live, to basically tune into those and check them out as you need to going forward. And you can check those out whenever you want to. So they'll be scrolling across the screen for those watching live. And for those watching later, you can check them out too. But yeah, for those watching, or for those listening rather, you can check them out later in the descriptions, wherever you may be finding your podcasts at. So thank you guys so much. Let's get into it. So as you may notice, for those of you guys watching live, you might see a different handle up in the top left corner. It says Gin Commish. It used to say Gin Presidente. For some reason, I don't really understand why, but it was getting confused with somebody else, and I'm not going to name their name here on this show, but it was getting confused with them. They're kind of, you know, seeing me as a copycat kind of guy. I don't want to see that. I don't want to get things confused. I don't want to get it twisted at all. We want to clear the air here. So we had the audacity to change that and make it Gin Commish. And I like that a little bit better. It flows off the tongue a little bit better. At the end of the day, I'm the commissioner anyway, so it makes a lot of sense. And people call me Commish all the time. Actually, shout out to Chris Platty. He called me the Commish. He started it. So shouts out Chris Platty, our NBA guy. So I'm going to leave it at that. I'm not going to really dive too deep into that, but don't really, dwell on it. It's not a big deal. Everything is happening how it has to, and things are falling into place. So we'll watch it. And, it is what it is now. Find my handle at Gin Commish on Twitter and Instagram. Look at me or find me wherever you have to. Find me on your socials and make it work. So kind of transitioning into that, this is some little housekeeping stuff for those of you guys that tune into us, listen to Gin Pros, the podcast, watch our live streams, watch our videos, check out our events, look at our posts, whatever you may do, what have you. We're doing a little bit of reconstructioning right now at Gin Pros. So it's kind of a big deal. It's really a big deal. There's a lot going on behind the scenes. There's a lot that goes on that does not meet the eye for the average viewer. So that has to kind of be, taken into account. I just want to keep everybody updated, keep everyone in the loop about what's going on in the back end. Can't get into specifics right now, but pretty soon you'll see that I will be getting into specifics. And basically we're going to let the cat out of the bag as far as everything that's been going on behind the scenes. Maybe not everything, but a lot of the things that have been going on behind the scenes that have been kept under wraps and tight to the vest. We will be letting those out and releasing those to the public. So stay tuned for that. I'll talk about that a little bit more at the end of the show. But right now, we have a very pertinent issue that is almost upon us. It's in the description of this live stream, this podcast. So if you're tuning in now or later, you'll know. But we'll tell you guys right here, right now. Fantasy football 2021 is upon us. It's here. It's finally here. After long last, we had, some tough breaks. Some things happened last year in fantasy that weren't really, in our radar, that we didn't really see coming. And that's kind of how it is with every fantasy year as far as fantasy football is concerned. There's going to be big things coming for fantasy football as far as Gin Pros' end is concerned. So stay tuned for that. That kind of reiterates what I just said and what I'll say at the end of the show. But focus on fantasy. It's coming up soon. Draft deadlines are approaching us as far as the NFL draft or the fantasy drafts are concerned. And it's really exciting stuff. It's almost like Christmas is coming, and it's like you're a little kid again, and you're anticipating Christmas. You're anticipating Christmas morning, getting all those presents that were on your Christmas list for Santa, and you just can't wait to open those presents up and get what you wanted. So that's a similar mentality, similar feeling to what we're experiencing over here as far as the fantasy football coming back, NFL fantasy football. So I'm really excited for this to come, and we'll kind of go into some different fantasy picks. So I'm going to share my screen with you guys right now for those of you watching live, and we'll dive into that a little bit more in depth too. So let's look at the top. I'll do the top 20, and this is a 2021 Fantasy Rankings Top 200 cheat sheet. We're not going to go that deep into the top 200. For some leagues, there's been different leagues thrown out there that even incorporate defensive players, and we're not going to get too much into the weeds with that right here, right now. But we'll talk about the players that are hot, the players that people are looking at, the players that people are scouting, and these rankings, as it is stated here on sportingnews.com, these rankings are based on standard 4-point passing TDs and non-PPR scoring. So that's pass or points per reception scoring, non-PPR. So this is based on a different format, different scale than we're used to. So let's go into number one, Derrick Henry, Tennessee Titans. That kind of goes without saying. He is the running back to get. If you want to get the most yards, you want to get the most, yards per reception, touchdowns, things like that, the first and goals, the goal lines, those types of drives, you're going to be looking for Derrick Henry to punch it in and get 6. So look out for Derrick Henry. He's going to be a hot pick just as much as Christian McCaffrey is with the Panthers. He's coming off an injury. He's obviously feeling better. He's rejuvenated. He's been training. He's been getting back to it, back to the gridiron, back to the grindstone, and he's ready. He's ready too, just as much as Dalvin Cook. And these guys, these rankings are kind of going into it. I think a lot of it is based on, past statistics. What do they do in certain situations? and where is the hype at? Because there's probably surveys, there's different things going out. Who is hot? Who's looking good in training camp? Who's looking good in practices? Who's looking good in shells? And for those of you who don't know or what shells are, basically that's a practice where you're just wearing your shoulder pads and your helmet. You're not wearing any, leg pads. You're not wearing any cups, nothing like that. You're not really anticipating getting hit or hitting anyone else in those types of practices. So shells and different, training drills that have been filmed, and, different news outlets report on different players, how they're performing in training camp, things like that. So that's where a lot of this news, I'm assuming, is coming from. So don't believe it all. There's going to be sleepers out there that you got to look out for. But moving on, let's talk about Saquon Barkley for the New York Giants, obviously a powerhouse running back. And as you can see, the top 7 here, they're all running backs, right? And then we kind of get into the wide receivers as we get into position 8 and beyond. But look out for these running backs. These running backs are big. They're big point scorers. For those of you who don't know what fantasy is, fantasy football is the only fantasy sport that I follow. Obviously, we have other insiders that follow sports like baseball, fantasy baseball. You got fantasy basketball, which I'll mention Chris Platty again, is big into that. I played it 1 year with him, and I just got my ass dragged across the court, and I just couldn't do it anymore. So I had to hang up the cleats, hang up the shoes, hang up the AIs for fantasy basketball. Just had to hang it up. It is what it is. And so fantasy football we're talking about. And basically you're looking for the players to succeed and score the most points. You get those points by yards. In a PPR league, you get points per reception, X amount of points, whichever is determined by the fantasy league leader will determine the point scale for the points per reception if that applies to your fantasy league. So then you got Alvin Kamara from the Saints, obviously a powerhouse running back. Not really, he can run through people. But he gets people with his agility. Nick Chubb too. He's more of a powerhouse guy. Gets down below, plays almost a fullback position in some scenarios. So look out for him. Ezekiel Elliott, obviously Zeke with the Cowboys is going to be a threat. We're not going to focus on the Cowboys too much because we're not big Cowboys fans over here at Gym Pros anymore. There used to be individuals associated with Gym Pros that were really big Cowboys fans. They were really, really into it. They even wore crazy ass hats. But that's a thing of the past, man. We're just moving on from that. I do have a lot of viewers though that are big Cowboys fans. So shouts out to my Uncle Doug and my Uncle John. I hope your team does good this year. I know Uncle Jerry is getting old, and he's getting, in Jerry's World is going to be, a thing of the past soon. And maybe they'll always call it Jerry's World. Who knows? But we'll see how they do and how long that lasts, how long his reign continues on. Then you got Tyreek Hill with the Chiefs. Big time wide receiver, going to be catching a lot of passes from Pat Mahomes this year. If in a PPR league, he's going to be doing great. Tyreek Hill would be my number 1 wide receiver based on, just with this sporting news, with this article aside, I'm going to be looking at Tyreek Hill for my wide receiver position in any fantasy league that I can snag him. If I get an early pick in a snake draft, then I'm going to be snagging Tyreek Hill real early and see how he does. Then you got Aaron Jones from the Packers giving you some heat. Then Devontae Adams, another PPR guy, going to be catching a lot of passes from Aaron Rodgers. Then you got Jonathan Taylor from the Colts, Antonio Gibson from the Washington football team. Now let's just pick a bone real quick. The Washington football team has yet to pick a mascot. Now we're going on 2 years, ladies and gentlemen, going on 2 years. Still no mascot, still no identity. They're just the Washington football team. And I almost, I don't cringe saying it, but I almost fear taking fire by saying the Washington Redskins, even though they were called that for decades. Okay, decades. They were called the Washington Redskins. Now, there's an identity there. Whether there's an issue socially, morally, or what have you with that name, I think that's more of a personal problem that we can kind of look beyond. Obviously, with the current tide, with the current climate here in the United States of America, it is deemed unacceptable to name anything, any team that's even somewhat derogatory or uses slang. I mentioned the Cleveland Indians. They're also, they're still the Cleveland Indians, but they don't have the Indian as their logo anymore. So that's slide. They're gonna let that one slide, I guess. It is what it is. I'm not gonna complain about it. But this is an issue that has plagued certain teams, and the Washington football team is one of them. Moving on, Travis Kelsey and the Chiefs. Your tight end, also going to be a big PPR guy, probably going to score a lot of touchdowns, going to be a big-time target for Pat Mahomes, always has been, always will be. Then you got DeAndre Hopkins from the Cardinals. At number 14, Stephon Diggs with the Bills, DK Metcalf with the Seahawks, big-time guy. You watch his workouts. This guy is just an absolute athlete, and he's bound to create some uproar in Seattle for the Seahawks. So look out for DK. He's going to be a big guy. Calvin Ridley from the Falcons, George Kittle from the 49ers as a tight end, Clyde Edwards-Helaire from the Chiefs as a running back, going to get some touches. Might not get every single touch, but he's going to get some touches for the Chiefs. And then finally, you got Allen Robinson with the Bears, going to be a big target for Justin Fields. He's already coming out big time for the Bears. The Bears are a serious threat. I don't say this about many teams. My past roommate, Josh Manson, big diehard Chicago Bears fan. Almost made me sick how much of a Bears fan he was. And if you watch the intro to this very video, to this live stream podcast, whatever you want to call it, I'm actually wearing a Brian Urlacher jersey because I think they were playing the Lions that day, and that's the only team I hate more than the Bears is the Lions. So you got to take the lesser of two evils when you have to. So that's all I'm going to say about that. I do like Justin Fields, though. I'm not going to take anything away from him. I hate Ohio State. I love Justin Fields. I hate the Bears. I love Justin Fields. You can be kind of unbiased. You can be biased towards the player and unbiased towards the team. That's something that I have, I've at times struggled with making that takeaway. But as time goes on, as life progresses, and as I mature as a human being, I'm able to look past that a little bit more and to, move on and look at things more objectively. And that's how we all should be when looking at things, especially in the fantasy league, because you have to look at things objectively regardless of how much you hate the team. You got to put those preconceived notions aside, and you're just trying to win. You want to win every single week. Take every week by week. Look at your trades, look at your waivers, look at those people on free agency. There's a lot of psychology that goes into creating a fantasy league and to playing in one, especially money leagues. Okay, guys? So we'll talk about that briefly too, and I'll just kind of look at you eye to eye for those of you guys watching me live and watching me later on. Let's talk about some fantasy IQ. So fantasy IQ is very important. You want to look at things objectively. I already went over that. You want to look at players that are going to get you the most points and get you the win every single week, or at least be in contention. You don't want to be playing, players that aren't going to be touching the ball that much. You don't want to be, playing players that haven't been playing well, that might be questionable, and you don't want to just, play them because, they'll play good, So once that kickoff starts at 1:00 or 12:30, whatever time the game starts, that's your lineup for the week. And especially if that's the game that they've played, depending on the league, sometimes you can get in there and bench players and switch players out if that game hasn't started. But for some leagues, they lock you out as soon as the first kickoff happens that week. Okay, now number 3 on the list, don't play players that are on a bye week. I've done this and made this mistake many a times, and I've seen people do it. And that's basically giving yourself an automatic L. It's giving yourself an automatic L for that week, and you don't want to do that. You want to kind of walk away from it, even if you're playing a player that is absolute dog shit and, he's just, not that good of a player, but you have him on your roster. Nobody else can play. Maybe the rest of your players are on bye, whatever. As long as you can get some points out of him and he's going to be playing and touching the ball, that's really all that matters. You want to be getting points because anyone can go off as long as they're touching the ball. Sometimes they're sleepers. Sometimes they're, 6th to 7th strings that are just never going to see the ball. Somehow they made it on your roster. And then you could not notice that. And then next thing you know, they're playing in the game and you can't switch them out because it's too late. So roster IQ is important and paramount within fantasy IQ. So they go hand in hand. That's really all it is right there. I don't want to reveal too much of my strategy because then I'll kind of, get into the weeds a little bit and talk about things that might not even apply to fantasy football. So I'll leave it at that. So consider that and, run home with it. On top of that, we have the Gin Fantasy League that is, there's going to be more information coming out into the weekend and into next week that we'll be talking about the league that we got going on. It's a 12-man. There's a format sheet that's going to be coming out here soon. $100 buy-in, so big ballers, big bettors only. You got to be betting on yourself. Bet on yourself and your strategy as far as a fantasy league player. You are the manager of your fantasy team. Treat it as such and treat it with respect. And that's obvious. That's stuff that goes without saying, without any rocket science involved. You have to treat your team with respect and, the attention that it needs and deserves. So big money league and a lot of information coming out soon. So stay tuned for that. I'm really excited for this fantasy league this year. Let's talk about something else. We're moving on now. Let's talk about the ACC Big Ten Pac-12 Alliance. It has officially been confirmed. Hands have shaken from multiple, I guess you want to say, lines of duty. You can talk about it and classify it however you want to, but hands have been shaken from each one of these conferences, and that's basically it. That's all we've heard so far, is that hands have shaken, agreements have been made, and alliances have been created. Whether or not that really affects the future, whether or not these names of these individual conferences that have been around for years will be changed to one name, that is yet to be determined. Nothing really has came out further than just the handshaking part. So we'll be looking forward for more information on that. This can really shake the world. I did my gin and tonic on this last Thursday. If you checked it out, sweet. If you didn't, go to our YouTube channel right now and check it out. But it's crazy that this is even happening to compete with the SEC. Now, Paul Finebaum called this responsible. He called this irresponsible. He called it embarrassing that they would even propose to do this, no matter how important, no matter how high of stature the SEC is. Obviously, they have powerhouse teams. I get that. They made it to multiple BCS championship bowls. I get that. But to take three conferences that are set in stone, they've had, their different values, their different pillars for years, to have them step away from that and recreate that whole thing. They're basically recreating the wheel using different parts. And I see what they're doing, so I like that aspect of it. But I think this looks a lot better on paper than it does in practice. And I might eat my words. It might work out great. But let's just see how it pans out. Let's see how it works out going forward. This is obviously breaking news, and it's going to affect college football and the entire college football landscape going forward into 2021 and into 2022 and beyond. If this goes through, it has gone through. How will this affect the landscape? How will this affect the playoff picture? Will it be a 12-team playoff? That is also yet to be determined as well. Aside from the alliance, obviously it involves the alliance, but it doesn't directly involve it in and of itself. It involves the entire college football landscape, the NCAA, you name it. So we'll see how this pans out, as this is a developing story. Moving on to golf. Let's talk about Rory Mcilroy. Today, in a report, he claimed that he was tired in practice rounds for the BMW Champs, which is coming up. We'll get into odds here in a second. He claimed that he was tired and that he said he has played too much golf. Now, that almost sounds like a foreign language to me, because I don't understand what he is saying. Played too much golf? How can you play too much golf? Maybe you work too hard and put on too many shingles if you work on roofs. Maybe you've laid too much pavement. Maybe you've planted too many flowers if you're a landscaper. Maybe you've laid too much mulch. This is crazy talk. And, especially something as enjoyable as golf. Now, I get it. These guys work their asses off year round, trying to, better themselves, trying to win championships, but they're doing the sport they love for a living. This is their career. Now, how much, lazier can you get to not want to even play golf? Now, I know you're working your ass off trying to be the best. I get that. It's hard work. It probably keeps you up at night sometimes if you're not living up to your own expectations. But the bottom line is, you made it there. You've played at the highest level. You've won at the highest level. You've done things at an early age that most people aspire to do that never will do. You're part of a small percentile of individuals that can do this for their living, period, end of story. So to be able to work your ass off and be good at something that is, at the end of the day, it's enjoyable, whether or not they treat it as a sport or they treat it as a job. doesn't really matter. But to say you've played too much golf and to kind of withdraw yourself from the picture and to say, okay, you're not conceding, but you're being conceited, if that makes sense. And if that doesn't make sense, I can clear that up for you. Not going to do that. But the bottom line is, Rory, you've played too much golf. Well, you got more golf to play. You're still a young guy. Yes, I get it. You're a dad. You have a lot of other priorities, maybe aside from the golf course, from the pitch right now. But focus on golf. This is what you do for a living. And if not, if you don't want to give it your all, then just retire. Just retire. You can do whatever you want with all the money you've made, all the earnings you've made thus far in your golf career. So, I mean, people would be disheartened for that, but we've kind of seen this narrative, even from the Olympics, from not wanting to play for Northern Ireland and represent his country, to now this, saying that he's played too much golf and that he's tired and that he's, getting, drained, things of that nature. That's not what people want to hear. But journalists, they're going to make a field day out of it. They're going to make a field day out of it, and they're going to love it when Rory says these things. So maybe golf fans don't love them as much. Yes, we find them interesting, but journalists love them, and they make their living off of statements like this. So let's move on to the BMW Champs. Let's talk about the odds. So I got them written down on paper here. I got the BMW Champs odds sheet. Now, the odds are not calculated to your traditional odds structure. They are more like horse betting odds, where Piper, if you're listening to this, you will understand what I'm talking about, where other people might have to get out their calculators to figure it out. So I hope that's not the case, because I don't have my calculator out. So I'm going to try to make sense of this. I know the bigger the number it is to 1, that means the odds are better for the better. And obviously, the closer that first number is to 1, those odds aren't as great or as favorable for the better. So let's go down the list here. Let's talk about some main guys that are anticipated to play well. And we'll get into some sleepers that I think can play well too. So Jon Rahm to win is plus 650 or 13-2. So you can kind of, reduce fraction there. It's like 6.5 to 1. He's anticipated to play very well at the BMW Champs. And he is, expected to outright win the championship and the tournament based on these odds and based on these, these bookies that have made these odds for golf. Now, I would love to sit in a boardroom where they're making odds for a golf match. I don't care if it's the Masters. I don't care if it's the U.S. Open. I don't care if it's the Periwinkle Championships of North Beach. I don't care. What are they talking about? What are they figuring out? Are they looking at practice rounds? Are they looking at their past top 10 performances? Okay, now I got to talk to Sobo about this before I go and make my own picks. But Sobo, you got to cut it clean. How do these guys come up with the odds? Answer that whenever you can. I'm anticipating your answer to that question because I don't know. Just because golf is such a unique sport to the point where the field that you're playing on. Now I get that you get 4 rounds in, an entire weekend or entire championship, tournament, cup, whatever it is. I get that. But you're playing on a different course every week. Now, that doesn't mean just the terrain is different. Also, the environment is different. That means the weather. That means the wind. That means the precipitation. So these types of things are factors that might or may not be concluded and basically considered by these bookies. And I want to know if they're considered or not. Because are they taking out a weather map and be like, oh, you know what, guys? We're looking at some serious rain this week. We're looking at some high winds. This could really affect the players. I mean, I still think Jon Rahm's going to win 13-2 though. Is that the type of conversation in a nutshell that's going on? I want to know that. Now, obviously, these things go on behind closed doors, and I might not get or gain access to all these inside, points and tips, but a man can ask. Moving on down the list, we got Xander Schauffele at 18-1, Dustin Johnson 20-1, JT 20-1, Jordan Spieth 20-1, Colin Morikawa 22-1, Cameron Smith 22-1. Now he just blew that title to Tony Finau on the final day of the last tournament, so we don't have to think about that too much, the National Trust. But it is what it is, and we can see what happens after he saved a double, or maybe I think he did save double, actually. He got up and down from close to the creek in the final round, and that was pretty early on. I think he just made the turn at that point. And Finau came out of nowhere and won it, a well-deserved championship after losing to Max Homa earlier in the year. So crazy stuff by Tony Finau. He deserved it. And moving on, we got DeChambeau at 28-1, Victor Hovland 28-1. And then, so who do I have? Who do I have as far as we're talking, top 10 finishers considered? We're talking about different, placements, different, scores per round. Obviously, Cameron Smith is 22-1, just scored a 60 at the National Trust. So that's kind of crazy, but is that an anomaly? Because we can see Phil Mickelson come out and win the PGA Championship, and he was like 270-1 because he hasn't even placed top 10 in 2 years. So that's kind of crazy. That's the type of thing. Those are the types of anomalies that Vegas cannot call out. There's no way they can anticipate that happening. And that just is what it is. So who do I have out of these guys? I'll give you 2 guys that I think are going to win it with the odds determined. So I really like Cameron Smith at 22-1. He has really high promise. I really like him a lot. He's been placing top 10 almost religiously. And he just fell short barely. I think he's going to have a similar Tony Finau moment where he, falls short and then comes back and rebounds really hard. He's been striking the ball very well, been really, playing his irons very consistently, very aggressively, and very precisely, and being very accurate with those irons. His driver is good. He'll have some holes where he goes rogue. Most of the time he can save it and come back and have good recovery. But I would say those are few and far between as far as, rogue holes go, double or worse. So I like Cameron Smith. Who else do I have? Now, Xander sitting at 18-1, just won the Olympics. He's got potential. High potential. But Victor Hovland's also a beast. He could almost, sneak into the sleepers, but since he's still in the 20s and, I put him as a serious contender for this tournament. Obviously, the course is going to be very playable and very scoreable coming up. So we'll look forward to that. And that can affect golfers in many different ways, even adversely at times. So I think I'm going to take JT at 20-1 as my second guy. He's also been up there. He just hasn't been able to close. He has to be able to close the door on the tournament and really finish strong. He's been keeping himself short. His putter has been so-so. His accuracy's been good. His irons have been okay. His yardages have been, here and there. But I like JT to win the BMW. And we'll see how he does. Obviously, I don't want to pick Jon Rahm just because he's the best odds to win. I think there's going to be a lot of weight on Jon Rahm just seeing those odds. So plus 650 or 13-2. So you think about 13-2, you take that down to 6-1 plus 650. And then you look at 20-1. Like that's got to be ridiculous. That's got to be in the thousands, right? To win that. So I like JT and I like Cam Smith. Lock it in. Now sleepers. I'll pick one sleeper and I'll talk about a couple here. I forgot to mention though, Brooks Koepka at 25-1 and Patrick Cantlay at 25-1, and then DeChambeau at 28-1. I'm going to leave those guys in the sidelines. I'm going to bench them right now. Moving on to sleepers. Abraham Answer, 35-1. Hideki Matsuyama, reigning Masters champ, 35-1. Harold Varner, the third, 80-1. 80-1, Harold Varner. Jonathan Vegas, 100-1. Now, you're talking about those odds in a numeric value. You're talking about some serious numbers. You're talking about some serious payouts. And these guys obviously have to win. These are the odds to win. So who am I taking out of this grouping here? I'll take Hideki Matsuyama, but I like all four of these guys. I like Abraham Answer, I like Matsuyama, I like Harold Varner, and Jonathan Vegas. These guys can come out and they can play. They can succeed. They can do what they have to do to get the ball in the hole. So we'll see what happens in the BMW Championship going forward. But I'm really excited for this. Maybe we can get Sobolewski on a show and talk about this a little bit further. I would love to hear his insights and his picks going into this tournament. Obviously, they tee off tomorrow, so it might be a little bit late. But we've been meaning to connect with Sobolewski for a couple weeks now. So we're going to have to do that and get that out to you guys so you guys can see that and hear those picks, because I want to hear them for myself and I want you guys to hear them too. finally, we're going to wrap up the show here, guys. Thank you for bearing with me all this time. I appreciate it. But the big news, I told you it was going to come out Tuesday, Wednesday, Monday even. Yeah, I might have fibbed a little bit. We had some, bumps in the road where we had to figure certain things out to make them work. Now, this big news is still under wraps. Hasn't been released, hasn't been, it's only been talked about on here. It hasn't even been talked about in text-related posts. That means tweets. That means Facebook text posts. That means Instagram pictures. Anything like that, it's all been under wraps until now. And until, well, I guess since the last live stream. But now it's coming out. You're getting more information. The people are screaming at me. The people are, getting antsy. And I like that. I like your energy. I just got to ask you to be a little bit more patient. Just a couple more days. I'm going to set the date, August 29th, 2021. That's this Sunday. We will be making the news release. We're going to break it out. We're going to break and blast the doors off this thing. And we're going to release the news to you guys. Very important and very exciting. So stay tuned. Keep your seatbelts on. And we'll get that news out to you as soon as possible. I'll wrap it up there, guys. Make sure to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and Twitch, too. Just follow our link tree. I'll put that at the bottom of the screen for you guys to check out. Check it out. Follow those links and stay connected with us. Stay connected to our website, ginpros.org. You can see that in the bottom right corner of your screen. And just stay tuned to everything that's going on. You don't want to miss anything. We got a lot of big plans coming up, so we don't want you guys to miss out on any of it. I'll leave it at that, though, guys. Thank you for tuning in to this edition of the official Gin Pros podcast. I'm your host, as always, John J. II. Have a great night.